Have you ever felt a darkness lurking within, a part of yourself you struggle to understand? Do you ever question the inexplicable cruelty and violence that seems to plague our world? What if the greatest threat to humanity lies not outside, but within the hidden depths of our own consciousness? The conventional understanding of consciousness often paints a picture of inherent goodness. But what if this is incomplete? What if, beneath the surface of our rational minds, lies a darker side that profoundly influences our thoughts, feelings, and actions, a hidden aspect that we desperately try to ignore? But what if our very failure to acknowledge this darkness is the very thing that perpetuates the cycles of suffering and destruction we see around us? We all possess a shadow self, a repository of repressed emotions, unacceptable desires, and destructive impulses that we often deny exists. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, understood this profoundly. He believed that the shadow is not merely a personal phenomenon, but a collective one, influencing group dynamics, political decisions, and even historical events. Ignoring this shadow, Jung warned, is like ignoring a ticking time bomb within our own psyche, a bomb capable of unleashing destructive forces upon ourselves and the world around us. Unacknowledged shadow can manifest in countless ways, from sudden outbursts of anger and self-sabotaging behaviors to prejudice, discrimination, and even large-scale conflicts like war. Therefore, understanding the shadow is not just a matter of personal growth, it is essential for the well-being of our society as a whole. That's precisely what we'll be doing today. We'll be providing you with a deeper understanding of the shadow self, exploring its origins, its multifaceted nature, and its pervasive influence on our lives. We will reveal practical strategies, techniques rooted in Jungian psychology, for integrating your shadow, understanding that this isn't about eliminating darkness, an impossible task, but about understanding and harnessing its power for positive transformation. We'll explore historical examples of societal shadow projection, demonstrating how unacknowledged darkness can lead to catastrophic consequences. The most profound insight, however, will be the revelation of the inextricable link between personal responsibility and societal change, challenging you to take ownership of your own inner darkness and to recognize how this act of self-awareness can ripple outwards, creating a more just and compassionate world. By the end of this video, you will be empowered to live more authentic, meaningful lives, contributing to a more just and compassionate world, starting from within. Exploring the shadow can be a challenging and often uncomfortable process. You might be experiencing feelings of fear, resistance, or even skepticism right now. Perhaps you're even thinking that focusing on darkness is inherently pessimistic or unproductive. We understand that it may feel counterintuitive to delve into the less desirable aspects of ourselves. It's completely normal to want to only focus on the good within ourselves. But it is through this understanding, through acknowledging the totality of our being, that we become whole. Many people struggle with acknowledging their shadow self, wanting to focus only on the positive, so let's create a safe space for exploring these difficult topics together. Let's continue with an open mind, knowing that what lies ahead has the power to transform not only ourselves, but the world around us. We've established that the shadow self exists, a hidden aspect of our psyche that can influence our thoughts and actions in profound ways. But let's address a crucial point that many find difficult to accept. The shadow is not a rare condition, a quirk of personality found only in a few troubled individuals. It is a universal inhabitant of the human psyche. It resides within each and every one of us, regardless of our conscious intentions, our perceived goodness, or our carefully constructed public image. Are you starting to see now how uncomfortable this conversation may become? This isn't about pointing fingers at bad people. It's about acknowledging a fundamental aspect of the human condition that affects us all. Now, prepare for a challenging perspective, one that may shatter your preconceived notions about the shadow self. The common misconception is that the shadow is solely composed of negative traits, a dark and menacing force lurking within. But what if this is only part of the picture? What if, hidden within the depths of our shadow, lies untapped potential, unrealized talents, and suppressed positive qualities waiting to be discovered? The shadow is not just a repository of darkness. It is also a wellspring of untapped energy and creativity. Think about it. What aspects of yourself do you find most difficult to acknowledge or accept? What qualities have you been told are unacceptable or undesirable? These very aspects may hold the key to unlocking your true potential. The shadow self primarily develops during childhood, through the often painful process of socialization. As children, we learn what is acceptable and unacceptable, what is rewarded and punished. Experiences of trauma can also contribute to shadow formation. When certain emotions, desires, or impulses are deemed bad or wrong, we learn to suppress them, pushing them into the unconscious realm of the shadow. We learn to wear a mask, to present a carefully curated version of ourselves to the world, while the unacceptable parts are banished from our conscious awareness. But what happens to these banished parts? Do they simply disappear? Of course not. They fester and grow in the darkness, influencing our behavior in subtle, often destructive ways. Consider the psychological mechanisms involved. Repression involves unconsciously pushing disturbing thoughts or desires out of awareness. Denial is consciously refusing to acknowledge reality. Projection involves attributing our own unacceptable qualities to others. Rationalization involves creating false justifications for our behavior. Each of these mechanisms contributes to the formation and maintenance of the shadow self. The shadow is not a static entity. It's a dynamic and ever-evolving aspect of our psyche, constantly influenced by our ongoing experiences and relationships. As we encounter new challenges and situations, our shadow may shift and change, incorporating new elements or releasing old ones. And here's where things get even more interesting. Carl Jung developed a technique called active imagination as a way to engage with and understand the shadow self. This involves deliberately entering into a state of focused imagination, allowing images, fantasies, and dreams to arise spontaneously. By engaging with these images and figures, we can begin to uncover the hidden contents of our shadow and bring them into conscious awareness. Let's consider some real-world examples of how the personal shadow can manifest in our lives. Imagine a successful business executive who sabotages their own career despite outwardly wanting success. This self-sabotage may stem from underlying feelings of inadequacy, a belief that they don't deserve their success. Or consider an outwardly kind and generous person who harbors intense resentment towards others. This resentment may be a reflection of their own suppressed anger and frustration, a part of themselves they are unwilling to acknowledge. Then, what of the creative individual who suppresses their artistic impulses out of fear of failure? This fear may be a manifestation of their shadow, a belief that their creative efforts are not good enough, or that they will be ridiculed for expressing themselves. Perhaps now you're wondering how these examples connect to the potential for good that lies within the shadow self. We can see further by analyzing literary and mythological characters. In Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we see the duality of human nature embodied in Dr. Man. Dr. Jekyll represents the conscious, rational self, while Mr. Hyde represents the repressed, darker impulses. The story highlights the destructive potential of unacknowledged darkness, but also hints at the creative energy that can be unleashed when the shadow is integrated. Another powerful example is the myth of Narcissus, a figure consumed by his own reflection. Narcissus represents the dangers of vanity and self-obsession, but also embodies the untapped potential for self-love and acceptance that lies within the shadow. What does this tell us about the human condition when these examples are so widespread? The unacknowledged shadow can have a devastating impact on our relationships. We often project our own shadow qualities onto others, seeing in them the very traits we despise in ourselves. This can lead to conflict, misunderstanding, and a lack of empathy. For instance, if you struggle with feelings of insecurity, you might be quick to criticize others for their perceived flaws or shortcomings. This criticism is not really about them. It's about your own unacknowledged shadow. Moreover, the shadow self can undermine our self-esteem, leading to feelings of shame, guilt, and self-sabotage. If you constantly berate yourself for your mistakes or shortcomings, you are likely being influenced by your shadow. The inner critic, the voice that tells you you're not good enough, is often a manifestation of the shadow self. Therefore, what steps can we take? Self-compassion and acceptance are essential in the process of shadow integration. Approaching your inner darkness with curiosity and understanding, rather than judgment, can lead to profound personal transformation. You can try journaling, recording your dreams, or use mindfulness meditation. Bringing the shadow self into the light helps us gain deeper understanding and control over our lives, paving the path towards integration. So, we can see the universality and potential impact of the shadow. If each individual possesses a shadow self, what does that mean for society as a whole? How does our collective darkness manifest in the world around us? In the next section, we will explore the darker side of human history, examining how unacknowledged shadow has led to prejudice, violence, and oppression on a grand scale. Stay with me, because what we'll uncover next is even more shocking. If each individual possesses a shadow self, what does that mean for society as a whole? What happens when the darkness within us is no longer confined to the individual psyche, but instead permeates the collective consciousness, shaping our cultures, our institutions, and even our history? This is not just a theoretical question. It's a matter of survival. Understanding the collective shadow is essential if we hope to navigate the complex and often dangerous world we've created. Now, let's delve deeper into the concept of the collective shadow. Just as the individual shadow represents the disowned aspects of a person's being, the collective shadow embodies the disowned or repressed aspects of a society's shared psyche. This includes historical traumas, cultural biases, unacceptable values, and all the things a society prefers to ignore or deny about itself. What aspects of our shared past do we collectively try to forget? What uncomfortable truths do we avoid confronting? The answers to these questions lie at the heart of the collective shadow. Think of it as a shared blind spot, a cultural amnesia that prevents us from seeing ourselves clearly. It is the accumulation of all the darkness a society refuses to acknowledge, the festering wound that continues to poison our collective well-being. And here's where things get even more unsettling. The collective shadow is often projected onto outgroups, scapegoats, or enemies. Prejudice, discrimination, and violence are fueled by this projection, as societies demonize those who represent their own disowned qualities. Consider how easily entire groups of people can be dehumanized, stripped of their individuality, and reduced to caricatures. This is not a random occurrence. It's a direct result of the collective shadow seeking an outlet, a convenient target for its repressed rage and fear. Even more disturbingly, the collective shadow can be deliberately manipulated by political leaders, media outlets, and other institutions to control populations and maintain power. Fear is a powerful tool, and those who understand how to exploit the collective shadow can use it to create division, sow discord, and ultimately, consolidate their own authority. What happens when our leaders appeal to our basest instincts? What happens when the media profits from sensationalizing fear and anger? we must be aware of it because they are actively manipulating the collective shadow. It is important to differentiate between the personal and the collective shadow here. One is the rejected parts of ourselves, the other is the rejected parts of our culture. Understanding this distinction is key to addressing both effectively. Consider some historical examples of societal shadow projection. The Holocaust, for instance, stands as a stark reminder of how an entire society can be consumed by irrational hatred and violence. The Nazi regime masterfully manipulated the collective shadow of the German people, exploiting existing prejudices and fears to create a climate of persecution and genocide. What role did propaganda play in shaping collective perceptions and justifying atrocities? Similarly, the Salem witch trials offer a chilling example of how mass hysteria and religious extremism can lead to the persecution of innocent people. Accusations of witchcraft were often based on personal grievances, social anxieties, and deeply ingrained patriarchal beliefs. How did social conditioning contribute to the creation of a climate where such accusations could be readily believed? Think about the Rwandan genocide, where ethnic tensions were deliberately inflamed by political elites, leading to the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people. All of these serve as proof of the power of this collective shadow self. Economic hardship, political instability, or social upheaval can exacerbate societal shadow projection, creating a breeding ground for extremism and violence. When people feel threatened or insecure, they are more likely to seek out scapegoats and embrace simplistic solutions that appeal to their darkest impulses. The unacknowledged collective shadow can lead to political polarization, social division, and a breakdown of civil discourse. When societies are unable to confront their own dark side, they become increasingly fragmented and hostile. The media and political systems often exploit the collective shadow to create fear, division, and control. Sensationalism, inflammatory rhetoric, and the demonization of opposing viewpoints are all tactics used to manipulate public opinion and maintain power. What are the consequences of societal shadow projection on marginalized groups? They experience disproportionate suffering and injustice as they become the targets of collective hatred and resentment. The legacy of slavery, the ongoing discrimination against immigrants, and the persistent inequalities faced by minority communities are all manifestations of the unacknowledged collective shadow. The collective shadow is not simply a historical phenomenon. It's a present-day reality that continues to shape our world. Acknowledging and addressing the collective shadow is essential for creating a more just, equitable, and peaceful society. But how will one work towards societal well-being if one is blind to the shadows influencing it? So, we've seen the pervasive influence and destructive potential of the collective shadow. If the collective shadow is so powerful, is it possible to address it? How can we heal the collective psyche and create a more conscious and compassionate world? In the next section, we will explore strategies for integrating the collective shadow, emphasizing the importance of dialogue, empathy, and social justice. Stay with me, because what we'll uncover next is how integrating the collective shadow can transform society. We've seen how the unacknowledged collective shadow can lead to political polarization, social division, and a breakdown of civil discourse. We've explored how the media and political systems often exploit the collective shadow to create fear, division, and control. But what if this destructive potential was something that someone specifically warned against? What if there was a voice from the past who foresaw the dangers of ignoring the shadow, both individually and collectively? That voice was Carl Jung. Jung issued a dire warning about the perils of ignoring the shadow, emphasizing the potential for individual and collective self-destruction if it remains unacknowledged and unintegrated. He believed that the shadow, when left unexamined, gains power over us, leading to unconscious behaviors, destructive patterns, and ultimately, societal collapse. What did Jung see that led him to issue such a strong warning, and why should we heed his words today? His insights into the human psyche, gleaned from decades of clinical practice and profound self-reflection, revealed a dark truth about consciousness, that within each of us, and within our societies, lies a potential for unimaginable cruelty and destruction. Jung explained that ignoring the shadow doesn't make it disappear. Rather, it amplifies its negative influence. Repressed shadow content, like a festering wound, can manifest in a variety of psychological symptoms, from everyday anxiety and depression to debilitating addiction and destructive relationship patterns. Individuals who are unaware of their shadow are often unconsciously driven by it, sabotaging their own happiness and well-being. Think of it like a puppet master pulling the strings from behind the curtain. The individual believes they are acting of their own free will, but in reality, they are being manipulated by their unacknowledged darkness. But here's where it gets even more frightening. Jung also introduced the concept of shadow possession, where an individual is unconsciously controlled by their shadow, leading to irrational actions and destructive behaviors that are completely out of character. Has someone ever acted in a way that was so out of character that it shocked you? It may have been a sign of shadow possession. Jung's warning is not, however, a call to suppress the shadow. He wasn't advocating for a life of sterile perfection, devoid of all darkness. Instead, he was urging us to understand and integrate the shadow, to bring its contents into the light of consciousness, and to harness its energy for creative and constructive purposes. The shadow, after all, is not purely negative. It also contains untapped potential, hidden talents, and a wellspring of creative energy. But without integration, the shadow will remain a destructive force, driving us towards self-sabotage and societal collapse. It is like a wild horse. Unbridled, it can cause chaos and destruction, but tamed and trained, it can be a source of immense power and speed. History is replete with examples where Jung's warning has come to fruition, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of ignoring the shadow. Consider the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century, where entire societies were consumed by hatred, violence, and irrationality. The psychological factors that contributed to these events are chillingly clear. The projection of shadow onto outgroups, the idealization of charismatic leaders, and the suppression of dissent. Think about how easily entire populations were swayed by propaganda, manipulated by fear, and driven to commit unspeakable atrocities. What role did the unacknowledged shadow play in these dark chapters of human history? Similarly, we can see Jung's warning being ignored in contemporary examples of political polarization, online echo chambers, and the spread of misinformation. How easily do we retreat into our own ideological bubbles, demonizing those who hold different views? How readily do we accept information that confirms our biases, while dismissing anything that challenges our beliefs? It is important to cite expert opinions from Jungian analysts, historians, and social scientists who have studied the consequences of unacknowledged shadow in society. Jung's warning is particularly relevant today, given the numerous challenges facing humanity. Climate change, political instability, social inequality, these are all complex problems that require conscious, collaborative solutions. But how can we hope to address these challenges effectively if we are blinded by our own unacknowledged darkness? Jung believed that shadow integration is not a luxury, but a necessity for personal and collective survival. It enables us to make more conscious choices, to see the world with greater clarity, and to create a more sustainable future for ourselves and for generations to come. He saw shadow integration as a path towards greater empathy, compassion, and understanding, enabling us to bridge divides and build more inclusive communities. By acknowledging our shared humanity, including our shared capacity for darkness, we can begin to heal the wounds that divide us and create a more just and equitable world. But it goes beyond empathy. The shadow can also be a source of creativity, innovation, and resilience. By consciously harnessing its energy, we can unlock new possibilities and find innovative solutions to the challenges we face. So can shadow integration help to solve some of the world's greatest challenges? Can we bring the unconscious into the light? If Jung's warning is so important, what can we do, individually and collectively, to heed his words and integrate the shadow? How can we begin to confront our own darkness and transform it into a source of strength and creativity? In the next section, we'll explore specific strategies for shadow integration, such as self-reflection, dialogue, and social activism. Stay with me as we delve deeper into how embracing our own shadows can contribute to societal healing and a brighter future. What awaits you may very well change your life. Jung's warning about the perils of ignoring the shadow wasn't just some abstract philosophical concept. It was a practical concern rooted in his understanding of how the unacknowledged shadow can manifest in our lives, both individually and collectively. He saw shadow possession as a key outcome of ignoring the shadow, where individuals are unconsciously controlled by their darker impulses. But what does this shadow possession truly mean, and how can we recognize it in ourselves and others? How does this connect to what we explored in section 16? Let's be clear. Shadow possession isn't about literal demonic entities taking over our bodies. It's a metaphor, a way of understanding how unacknowledged shadow content, repressed emotions, unacceptable desires, destructive impulses can unconsciously influence our behavior, thoughts, and emotions. It's like a subtle takeover, where our conscious self is no longer fully in control. Our shadow becomes the puppeteer, and we become the puppets, acting out its hidden agendas without even realizing it. But here's the critical question. How can we tell when we are acting from our conscious selves, and when are we under the influence of our shadow? Shadow possession occurs when these repressed emotions, unacceptable desires, or destructive impulses break through the conscious mind and take control of our behavior. It's not always dramatic or obvious. In fact, it's often subtle and insidious, manifesting in irrational reactions, impulsive actions, and self-sabotaging patterns. Think of it as a slow burn, where our shadow gradually erodes our self-control, leading us down paths we wouldn't consciously choose. What are the psychological mechanisms that allow this to happen? Emotional reactivity, cognitive distortions, and behavioral compulsions all play a role. The psychological process involves complexes, which are emotionally charged, unconscious ideas and images that can trigger shadow possession. Let's explore an example of a complex. Imagine someone who experienced childhood neglect. This can lead to a complex centered around abandonment and unworthiness. As an adult, this person might be overly sensitive to perceived slights or rejections, reacting with disproportionate anger or withdrawal. They might unconsciously sabotage their relationships, pushing people away before they can be abandoned again. This is shadow possession in action. The repressed pain and fear from childhood are breaking through the conscious mind, distorting perception and driving behavior. Have you ever noticed yourself or someone else consistently repeating the same negative patterns in relationships, despite consciously wanting something different? This could be a sign of an active, unresolved, complex influencing behavior from the shadow. We can see manifestations of shadow possession in everyday life. Take, for example, outbursts of anger over seemingly minor issues. Someone might lash out at a loved one for leaving a dish in the sink, but the anger is actually rooted in deeper, unacknowledged feelings of resentment or frustration. Or consider impulsive spending, where someone buys things they don't need, driven by a desire for instant gratification or a need to fill an emotional void. Addictive behaviors like gambling or substance abuse are also often fueled by shadow possession, as individuals seek to escape from painful emotions or repressed desires. Relationship conflicts are fertile ground for shadow possession, as unresolved issues and unmet needs can lead to destructive patterns of communication and behavior. Think about how easily a simple disagreement can escalate into a full-blown argument, with both parties saying things they later regret. Political figures and celebrities are not immune to shadow possession. In fact, their high-profile positions often make them more vulnerable to its influence. Consider the politician who preaches family values but is caught engaging in scandalous behavior, a celebrity who advocates for social justice but is revealed to be hypocritical, or the leader who makes irrational decisions that harm their constituents. Such behavior often reveals a stark disconnect between their public persona and their private actions, suggesting that their shadow has taken control. The inconsistency between words and deeds suggests that their shadow has broken through. Has there been a time when a public figure shocked you with some hypocritical act? Even social media can exacerbate shadow possession. The anonymity and lack of accountability online can create opportunities for impulsive posting, online aggression, and the spread of misinformation. People often say things online that they would never say in person, driven by anger, frustration, or a desire to feel superior. The rapid-fire nature of social media also makes it easier to react impulsively, without taking the time to consider the consequences. Is social media a playground for the shadow? Perhaps it is a reflection of the unacknowledged darkness within each of us. But what are the solutions? Recognizing shadow possession is the first step towards regaining control, but it requires honesty, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront one's inner darkness. It's not easy to admit that we are capable of destructive thoughts and behaviors, but it's essential if we want to break free from the grip of the shadow. Practical strategies for resisting shadow possession include mindfulness meditation, which can help us become more aware of our thoughts and emotions in the present moment. Emotional regulation techniques, such as deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, which can help us manage strong emotions. And cognitive restructuring, which involves challenging and changing negative thought patterns. Seeking support from therapists, counselors, or trusted friends can also be invaluable in the process of shadow integration. Stay with me as we uncover how we can come to terms with our darkness to reveal the light. The implications of acknowledging and integrating the shadow are profound. It can lead to greater emotional intelligence, resilience, and authenticity. When we understand our own darkness, we are better able to empathize with others and to navigate difficult situations with greater skill and compassion. We are less likely to be triggered by our own repressed emotions and less likely to project our shadow onto others. Think about it. Have you ever wondered why you did that thing, or why you reacted that way? That's your shadow at work. What can we do to take the power back? If shadow possession is so pervasive, is it possible to fully integrate the shadow? What are the rewards of undertaking this challenging but transformative journey? In the next section, we'll explore specific strategies for shadow integration, emphasizing the importance of self-reflection, dialogue, and social activism. And we will explore the positive aspects of the shadow and its potential to fuel creativity and innovation. We've explored the subtle yet pervasive influence of shadow possession and the ways that our darkness can unconsciously steer our actions. But let's delve even deeper. The shadow isn't just a collection of random, repressed traits. It has its own hidden agenda that often runs counter to our conscious desires. And what are the primary goals of this unintegrated shadow? How do these manifest as destructive tendencies in our lives and in the world around us? Stay with me, and we will peel back the layers of this disturbing truth. The shadow's agenda, at its core, is driven by primal instincts and repressed desires, often those deemed unacceptable by our conscious minds or by societal norms. Think of the raw, unfiltered need for power, the craving for control, the desperate search for recognition, and the overwhelming drive for self-preservation. These desires in and of themselves aren't inherently evil. They are fundamental aspects of human nature. However, when these desires remain unacknowledged, unexamined, and uncontrolled, they can fester and manifest in profoundly destructive ways. Aggression becomes unchecked rage. Manipulation replaces honest communication. Envy morphs into corrosive bitterness, and self-preservation descends into ruthless selfishness. These desires, when unintegrated, are not in harmony with our conscious intentions. The shadow often seeks to undermine those intentions, leading to internal conflict and that frustrating sense of being stuck in negative patterns. Jung introduced the concept of the inferior function, the least developed and most vulnerable aspect of our personality. The shadow often exploits this inferior function, turning our weaknesses against us. For example, an intellectual type who prides themselves on logic and reason might have an inferior feeling function. Their shadow could then manifest as sudden, irrational outbursts of emotion or a deep-seated fear of intimacy. The shadow's agenda becomes clear: to drag us down to the level of our least developed selves, to undermine our conscious efforts at growth and integration. What this means is that we all have a weak link in our psychological armor, and the shadow is adept at finding and exploiting it. Consider the case of a politician driven by an insatiable ambition for power. Consciously, they might claim to be motivated by a desire to serve the public good. However, their unacknowledged shadow, fueled by a thirst for control, can lead them down a path of corruption and betrayal. They might make unethical deals, manipulate public opinion, or even abuse their authority, all in the name of achieving their hidden agenda, to amass more power and influence. What does this tell us about the corrosive influence of unbridled ambition? It demonstrates that unchecked desire, even when cloaked in noble intentions, can have devastating consequences. Or consider the individual who sabotages their own relationships due to a deep-seated fear of intimacy. On the surface, they might desire love and connection. Yet their shadow, scarred by past experiences of rejection or abandonment, whispers doubts and insecurities. They might push away potential partners, create unnecessary conflict, or engage in self-destructive behaviors, all to avoid the vulnerability of true intimacy. What is the underlying agenda here? To protect themselves from the pain of potential heartbreak, even at the cost of genuine connection. The tragedy is that, in fulfilling their shadow's agenda, they perpetuate the very cycle of pain they are trying to escape. Shakespeare's Iago in Othello embodies the shadow's agenda with chilling clarity. Iago, outwardly loyal and helpful, is consumed by envy and resentment towards Othello. His shadow drives him to manipulate and deceive those around him, ultimately leading to Othello's tragic downfall. Iago's motives are complex, but at their core lies a desire for power and control, fueled by his wounded ego. He seeks to destroy Othello, not for any rational reason, but to satisfy his own twisted sense of justice and to elevate himself in the process. What Iago reveals is the destructive potential of unchecked envy, and the lengths to which the shadow will go to achieve its twisted goals. Real-world examples of corporate scandals, political corruption, and social injustices reflect the shadow's agenda on a collective scale. Think about the Enron scandal, where executives driven by greed and a hunger for profit engaged in widespread fraud, leading to the ruin of thousands of employees and investors. Consider the systemic racism that continues to plague societies around the world, fueled by unconscious biases and a desire to maintain power hierarchies. These examples demonstrate how unacknowledged desires for power and control can lead to widespread harm, impacting not just individuals but entire communities. This is the dark side of humanity unleashed on an enormous scale. Now, let's consider how power structures and systems amplify these shadows. Hierarchies of power, whether in corporations, governments, or social institutions, create opportunities for abuse and exploitation. When individuals in positions of authority are driven by their unacknowledged shadows, they can use their power to oppress, manipulate, and control others. Corruption becomes systemic, greed becomes normalized, and oppression becomes institutionalized. In these environments, the shadow's agenda becomes amplified, leading to widespread injustice and suffering. Systems of power can also become breeding grounds for shadow projection, where dominant groups project their own fears and insecurities onto marginalized groups, justifying discrimination and violence. What this means is that society can become a mirror, reflecting back the darkest aspects of our collective unconscious. Recognizing the shadow's agenda is crucial for preventing destructive behaviors and regaining conscious control of our lives. How can we accomplish this? It requires a relentless commitment to self-awareness, a willingness to confront our inner darkness, and the courage to challenge our own hidden motives. Practical strategies include paying close attention to recurring patterns of behavior, analyzing our emotional reactions, and seeking honest feedback from trusted others. Do certain situations trigger disproportionate anger, fear, or resentment? Are there patterns of self-sabotage or conflict in our relationships? These could be signs that the shadow is at work, attempting to steer us towards its destructive goals. Self-compassion and acceptance are also essential in the process of shadow integration. We all have a shadow, and it is not something to be ashamed of. It is simply a part of being human. The key is to acknowledge its existence, understand its motivations, and learn to manage its influence. This is not a process of elimination, but one of integration. We can't simply banish our shadows. We must learn to live with them, to harness their energy for constructive purposes. What this looks like is setting healthy boundaries, practicing mindfulness, and engaging in creative expression that channels the shadow's energy into something productive. By acknowledging and working with our shadow, we can transform its destructive tendencies into positive forces in our lives. In what areas of your life do you tend to have destructive tendencies? Take a moment to reflect. But here's a twist that most people miss. If the shadow has such a powerful negative influence, does it also contain a hidden potential for good? Can we harness the shadow's energy for creative and constructive purposes? While it might seem contradictory, it's vital to understand the shadow doesn't exclusively house negative traits. It is also a wellspring of untapped potential, raw energy, and hidden creativity. Stay with me, because in the next section, we'll explore the positive aspects of the shadow, emphasizing its role in creativity, innovation, and personal growth. And prepare yourself. What we'll discover is that shadow integration leads to a greater sense of wholeness. But here's a twist that might challenge everything you thought you knew. What if the darkness within you isn't just a source of destructive tendencies, but also a wellspring of untapped potential? What if the very thing you try to hide is the key to unlocking your full creativity, innovation, and personal growth? It's easy to see the shadow as a purely negative force, a repository of repressed emotions, dark impulses, and destructive tendencies. But Jung argued that the shadow is far more complex than that. It's not just a garbage dump for unwanted traits. It's also a storehouse of hidden strengths, unrealized talents, and untapped sources of energy. Within the shadow lies not only the pain of past traumas and the sting of past failures, but also the raw material for resilience, the spark of creativity, and the potential for profound transformation. It is the acknowledgement and integration of these seemingly conflicting elements that paves the way for wholeness. The shadow contains not only negative traits and repressed desires, but also positive qualities such as assertiveness, passion, intuition, and a connection to primal instincts. What this means is that the shadow isn't all bad. It's simply unrefined. Assertiveness, when unbridled, can become aggression. Passion, when unchecked, can become obsession. Intuition, when ignored, can lead to missed opportunities. But these qualities, when integrated and channeled, can be powerful forces for good in our lives. Think about it. How many times have you suppressed your anger, fearing that it would make you seem unlikable or out of control? How many times have you stifled your ambition, worried that it would make you seem greedy or ruthless? How many times have you ignored your intuition, dismissing it as irrational or illogical? In each of these instances, you were suppressing a part of your shadow, denying yourself access to a valuable source of energy and potential. What if, instead of suppressing these qualities, you learned to harness them, to channel them in a way that was both authentic and constructive? Integrating the shadow can lead to greater authenticity, as individuals become more comfortable expressing their full range of emotions and experiences. When you embrace your shadow, you no longer have to pretend to be someone you're not. You no longer have to hide your flaws, your imperfections, or your darker impulses. You can be honest about your feelings, your desires, and your motivations, even when they're not socially acceptable. This authenticity can be incredibly liberating, freeing you from the burden of living up to others' expectations and allowing you to live a life that is truly your own. Consider the case of an artist who channels their anger and frustration into powerful works of art. Instead of lashing out at others or suppressing their emotions, they use their art as a way to express their pain, their rage, and their sense of injustice. In doing so, they not only create something beautiful and meaningful, but they also transform their negative emotions into a source of creative energy. What does this demonstrate about the transformative power of art? It shows that even the darkest emotions can be channeled into something positive and constructive. Or think about a business leader who embraces their intuition and takes calculated risks to achieve success. Instead of relying solely on logic and reason, they trust their gut instincts, their hunches, and their flashes of insight. This intuition allows them to see opportunities that others miss, to anticipate market trends, and to make bold decisions that propel their business forward. What this says about intuition in business is that it's not just a matter of luck. It's a skill that can be cultivated and harnessed to achieve extraordinary results. Batman is a prime example of a character who embodies the integrated shadow. He uses his own darkness, his own pain, and his own thirst for vengeance to fight crime. He doesn't deny his shadow. He embraces it, channeling it into a force for justice. What this reveals about Batman is that he's not just a hero. He's a survivor, a warrior who has stared into the abyss and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever. Historical and contemporary figures who are seen as polarizing often display this integration. Think of figures like Steve Jobs, who was known for his ruthless ambition and his unwavering pursuit of perfection, but also for his visionary genius and his ability to inspire innovation. Or consider figures like Margaret Thatcher, who was admired for her strength and her conviction, but also criticized for her uncompromising policies and her lack of empathy. These figures, while controversial, were also highly effective in their respective fields, demonstrating the power of the integrated shadow to drive ambition and achieve extraordinary results. Integrating the shadow is a lifelong process that requires ongoing self-awareness, compassion, and a willingness to confront one's inner darkness. It's not a one-time fix. It's a continuous journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance. Specific techniques for engaging with the shadow include journaling, dream analysis, active imagination, and shadow work exercises. Journaling can help you to identify and explore your shadow traits, to understand their origins, and to track their influence on your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Dream analysis can provide valuable insights into your unconscious mind, revealing hidden aspects of your shadow that you may not be aware of in your waking life. Active imagination, a technique developed by Jung, involves engaging in a dialogue with your shadow, allowing you to explore its motivations, its desires, and its fears. And shadow work exercises, such as those found in books and online resources, can provide practical tools and techniques for integrating your shadow and harnessing its energy. Self-acceptance and self-compassion are essential in the process of shadow integration. You must acknowledge that everyone has a shadow and that it is not something to be ashamed of. It's easy to fall into the trap of self-criticism and self-loathing when confronting your shadow traits, but it's important to remember that you are not your shadow. You are not your anger, your fear, or your shame. You are simply a human being with a complex and multifaceted psyche. Treat yourself with kindness, with compassion, and with understanding, even when you're facing your darkest impulses. Harnessing the shadow's energy for creative and constructive purposes involves setting healthy boundaries, practicing assertiveness, and engaging in activities that allow for emotional expression. Setting healthy boundaries can help you to protect yourself from the negative influences of your shadow, preventing it from overwhelming you or leading you to act in destructive ways. Practicing assertiveness can help you to express your needs, your desires, and your opinions in a way that is both authentic and respectful. And engaging in activities that allow for emotional expression, such as art, music, dance, or writing, can provide a safe and healthy outlet for your shadow energies, allowing you to channel them into something positive and constructive. By embracing these darker aspects, you can lead a life more true to yourself, one where you are no longer held back by fear, shame, or self-doubt. This allows you to step into your full potential, to express your unique gifts, and to make a meaningful contribution to the world. So, we've seen how integrating the shadow can lead to greater creativity, authenticity, and resilience. But what impact can it have on society as a whole? Can personal shadow integration contribute to creating a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world? The answer might surprise you. Stay with me, because what we'll explore next is the ripple effect of shadow integration, emphasizing the importance of collective healing and social justice. We'll uncover how taking the journey inward can positively impact your external surroundings, and why this is more critical now than ever before. We've seen how integrating the shadow can lead to greater creativity, authenticity, and resilience in our individual lives. But how does working on one's own shadow contribute to the betterment of society? And what does that process look like on a grand scale? Think about it. Can individual actions truly make a difference in the face of systemic injustice and widespread social issues? The beautiful truth is that individual shadow integration fosters empathy by allowing individuals to recognize and accept the darkness within themselves and others. This inner recognition dramatically reduces judgment and promotes understanding. When you've grappled with your own capacity for anger, fear, and prejudice, you're less likely to condemn others for their struggles. You begin to see their actions not as isolated incidents of bad behavior, but as manifestations of deeper, often unconscious, forces. This shift in perspective creates a more compassionate and tolerant society, where individuals are valued for their humanity, not judged for their imperfections. Integration also cultivates a profound sense of personal responsibility for one's actions and their impact on the world. When you're aware of your shadow's influence, you're more likely to make conscious choices that align with your values and contribute to the greater good. You recognize that your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors have a ripple effect, influencing the people around you and shaping the world you live in. This awareness inspires ethical behavior, encourages you to speak out against injustice, and motivates you to take action to create positive change. No longer can you stand idly by and allow negative patterns to continue. But here's what most people miss. Integration inspires conscious action by empowering individuals to challenge injustice, advocate for marginalized groups, and promote social change. When you integrate your shadow, you tap into a source of courage and resilience that allows you to confront difficult issues and take bold steps towards a better world. You are no longer afraid to speak your truth, to stand up for what you believe in, or to challenge the status quo. This inspires moral imagination, the ability to envision a more just and compassionate world, and to take concrete steps to bring that vision to reality. What if more people truly acted from a place of wholeness? Consider the example of Bryan Stevenson, a lawyer who has dedicated his life to fighting for the rights of the wrongly convicted and the incarcerated. Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, has witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of systemic racism and inequality on individuals and communities. His unwavering commitment to justice stems from a deep understanding of the human condition, including his own capacity for prejudice and bias. He has spoken and written extensively about the need to confront our history of racial injustice and to create a more equitable society for all. Stevenson's work demonstrates how personal integration can lead to collective healing, transforming the lives of individuals and communities. Or take the story of Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who was shot by the Taliban for advocating for girls' education. Malala's courage and resilience in the face of adversity have inspired millions around the world. Her unwavering commitment to education stems from a deep sense of empathy for girls who are denied their basic rights. She has used her platform to advocate for gender equality, to promote access to education, and to challenge oppressive regimes. Her work demonstrates how personal integration can empower individuals to challenge injustice and to create positive social change. These figures are examples of positive shadow integration in action. Conversely, movements such as restorative justice initiatives are another example. Restorative justice seeks to repair the harm caused by crime by bringing together victims, offenders, and community members in a safe and supportive environment. Through dialogue, empathy, and accountability, these initiatives aim to promote healing, reconciliation, and social cohesion. Restorative justice embodies the principles of shadow integration by recognizing the humanity of both victims and offenders, addressing the root causes of crime, and creating opportunities for personal and collective transformation. But societal integration is a complex and challenging process that requires overcoming numerous obstacles. Systemic injustice, cultural biases, and political polarization all contribute to the perpetuation of shadow projection and social inequality. Privilege and power dynamics further exacerbate these issues, creating a system where some individuals and groups benefit from the oppression of others. Are these challenges too daunting to overcome? Overcoming these obstacles requires a multifaceted approach. We must create safe spaces for dialogue, reflection, and reconciliation, where individuals from different backgrounds can come together to share their stories and perspectives. We must challenge prejudice and discrimination, advocate for policy changes that promote equality and justice, and support community initiatives that empower marginalized groups. In what ways can you reach out in your community to make a positive impact? Can you volunteer your time, donate to a worthy cause, or simply start a conversation with someone who has different beliefs than you? Every action, no matter how small, can contribute to the collective effort to create a more just and compassionate world. If individual and societal integration are so intertwined, how can we foster collective healing and embrace our shared humanity in a world that often seems divided and polarized? We've explored the ripple effect of individual integration, reinforcing the importance of empathy, responsibility, and conscious action. What's coming next is strategies for collective healing, emphasizing the power of dialogue, empathy, and social justice. Understanding these techniques is how one takes action and comes closer to wholeness. Stay with me, because there are many more secrets yet to uncover. If we are to move forward toward individual and collective healing, it is essential to embrace our shared humanity, acknowledging that we are all interconnected and capable of both great good and unspeakable evil. But here's what's really unsettling. Even seemingly good people can commit evil acts. This phenomenon, known as the Lucifer effect, reinforces the urgency of understanding Jung's warning about the shadow. Are some people truly immune to the Lucifer effect, or does the potential for darkness reside within us all, waiting to be unleashed by the right circumstances? The Lucifer effect is a concept popularized by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who conducted the infamous Stanford prison experiment. What he revealed was profoundly unsettling. The environment we are placed in, the roles we adopt, and the authority we obey can twist even the most virtuous individuals into perpetrators of harm. The Lucifer effect isn't about inherently evil people. It's about how situational forces can corrupt anyone. Dehumanization, for example, involves stripping individuals or groups of their humanity, making it easier to justify violence or oppression against them. Think about how dehumanizing language was used to justify slavery or the Holocaust, how members of opposing groups were turned into animals or monsters. Authority plays a crucial role, as people are often willing to obey orders from authority figures, even if those orders conflict with their own moral compass. Conformity is another powerful force. The desire to fit in and avoid social rejection can lead individuals to go along with harmful group behaviors, even if they know it's wrong. The dynamics of a group can amplify these effects, creating a sense of collective identity that overrides individual conscience. And finally, moral disengagement allows individuals to rationalize unethical behavior by minimizing their personal responsibility or blaming others. What this all means is the most virtuous among us can become twisted by situation and circumstance, even if we believe ourselves immune. To fully grasp the implications of the Lucifer effect, consider the Stanford prison experiment, a chilling demonstration of how ordinary students transformed into abusive guards and submissive prisoners within a simulated prison environment. The guards, given power and anonymity, quickly began to humiliate and degrade the prisoners, subjecting them to psychological torture. The prisoners, stripped of their identity and autonomy, became increasingly passive and compliant, some even experiencing emotional breakdowns. The experiment, originally scheduled to last 2 weeks, was shut down after only 6 days due to the disturbing behavior of the participants. But the Stanford prison experiment isn't an isolated case. The Abu Ghraib prison scandal, where American soldiers abused and tortured Iraqi prisoners, is another stark example of the Lucifer effect in action. Similarly, the My Lai massacre, in which American soldiers brutally killed hundreds of unarmed Vietnamese civilians, demonstrates the devastating consequences of dehumanization, obedience to authority, and group dynamics. Think about Adolf Hitler, for example, who manipulated fear and prejudice to justify unspeakable atrocities. He created an environment of dehumanization and obedience that allowed ordinary people to participate in mass murder. On the other hand, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire positive change and resistance against injustice. What does this tell us about the human psyche when put in specific conditions? These examples challenge the assumption that some people are inherently good and others are inherently evil. The Lucifer effect demonstrates that all individuals are susceptible to situational influences that can lead them to act in destructive ways. Recognizing our vulnerability to darkness is essential for preventing the Lucifer effect, promoting self-awareness, ethical decision-making, and resistance to harmful social pressures. Critical thinking allows us to question authority and challenge group norms. Moral courage enables us to stand up for what is right, even in the face of opposition. A strong sense of personal values provides a foundation for ethical decision-making. In these moments, moral disengagement allows people to act in ways that contradict their values. The illusion of immunity is perhaps the most dangerous aspect of the Lucifer effect. If we believe that we are somehow immune to the forces of darkness, we become complacent and fail to recognize the warning signs. We must accept that we are all capable of both good and evil, and that our actions are shaped by the situations we find ourselves in. In essence, you are not immune, no matter how upstanding you believe yourself to be. How much of your identity is shaped by the roles society imposes on us? We've seen how even good people can do evil under the influence of situational forces. If we are all vulnerable to the Lucifer effect, how can we cultivate the strength to resist the pull of darkness and ensure that goodness prevails in our lives and in the world? The next section will explore specific strategies for cultivating goodness, emphasizing the importance of empathy, compassion, and moral courage. We're only scratching the surface of recognizing and resisting the Lucifer effect, and what's coming next will help you fortify your inner defenses. Stay with me, the deepest insights are yet to come. We've established the uncomfortable truth: even seemingly good people can commit evil acts. The Lucifer effect looms large, reminding us that the potential for darkness resides within us all, waiting to be unleashed by the right circumstances. But how can we cultivate the strength to resist the pull of darkness and ensure that goodness prevails? If we are all vulnerable, is there an active defense, a means of proactively building our inner fortifications against the shadow's insidious creep? What specific practices, principles, and perspectives can we adopt to cultivate goodness and resist the seductive power of the Lucifer effect? Cultivating goodness isn't a passive state of being. It requires active and ongoing effort. It rests upon three essential pillars: empathy, moral courage, and critical thinking. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, to step into their shoes and experience the world from their perspective. Moral courage is the willingness to stand up for what is right, even when facing opposition, risk, or personal cost. And critical thinking is the ability to analyze information objectively, identify biases, and question assumptions, preventing us from being easily swayed by manipulation or harmful ideologies. These are not innate traits but cultivated skills, requiring constant practice and self-reflection. These pillars help to create a strong foundation against the Lucifer effect, acting as inner defenses to make moral action more instinctive. Empathy, at its core, is about recognizing the shared humanity in everyone, regardless of their background, beliefs, or actions. It allows us to connect with others on a deeper level, fostering compassion, reducing prejudice, and promoting prosocial behavior. But what does it really mean to empathize? It means actively listening to others, seeking to understand their experiences, and validating their feelings even when we disagree with them. Think about it. How often do we truly listen to understand versus listen to respond? Now, consider moral courage, which isn't about being fearless but about acting despite fear. It requires us to overcome our own anxieties, insecurities, and self-doubt in order to stand up for what we believe is right. It can be as simple as speaking out against injustice in our daily lives, or as significant as challenging oppressive systems that perpetuate harm. Critical thinking allows us to question assumptions, challenge biases, and evaluate evidence objectively, helping us to resist manipulation and make ethical decisions. But here's the twist. Critical thinking requires intellectual humility, a willingness to admit when we are wrong and to consider alternative perspectives. When was the last time you actively sought out opinions that differed vastly from your own? To truly understand the power of these pillars, consider the story of Nelson Mandela. Mandela demonstrated extraordinary empathy by seeking to understand the perspectives of his oppressors, even after decades of imprisonment. His empathy allowed him to foster reconciliation and build a new South Africa based on equality and justice. Similarly, Rosa Parks demonstrated moral courage by refusing to give up her seat on a bus, sparking the Montgomery bus boycott and igniting the civil rights movement. Her act of defiance, though seemingly small, challenged the deeply entrenched system of racial segregation in the United States. Think about whistleblowers who expose corporate corruption, like Sharon Watkins, who alerted Enron's CEO to accounting irregularities that eventually led to the company's downfall. Despite facing immense pressure and potential retaliation, she acted with moral courage to expose wrongdoing. Organizations like Amnesty International, dedicated to promoting human rights around the world, embody these principles by advocating for the rights of marginalized communities and challenging injustice wherever it exists. Take these examples and look at your own life. Can you identify an instance where one of these virtues may have been helpful in a difficult situation? Now, let's delve deeper into how active imagination and shadow work can make you more empathetic. By confronting your own suppressed emotions and desires, you develop a greater capacity to understand and accept the full spectrum of human experience, both in yourself and in others. You see, when you acknowledge your own capacity for anger, fear, and resentment, you become less judgmental and more compassionate towards those who struggle with iller emotions. Dr. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of integrating the shadow self, recognizing that it contains not only negative qualities, but also untapped potential for creativity and growth. By exploring our shadow, we can gain access to hidden strengths and develop a more balanced and integrated personality. Psychological studies support the link between empathy, moral courage, critical thinking, and ethical behavior. Research shows that individuals with higher levels of empathy are more likely to engage in pro-social behavior, such as helping others in need and volunteering in their communities. Those with moral courage are more likely to resist harmful social pressures and challenge injustice. And those with critical thinking skills are better able to evaluate information objectively and make ethical decisions, even in complex situations. What does it mean when someone tells you to grow up? Cultivating goodness isn't simply about avoiding evil. It's about actively integrating these pillars into our daily lives, fostering a sense of personal responsibility and striving for wholeness. It requires us to be mindful of our thoughts, words, and actions, and to constantly strive to align them with our values. Start with empathy by actively listening to others, seeking out diverse perspectives, and engaging in acts of kindness and compassion. Look someone in the eye and hear them out. Practice moral courage by setting ethical boundaries, speaking out against injustice, and challenging harmful social norms. Don't be afraid to stand alone. Develop critical thinking skills by questioning assumptions, seeking evidence, and considering alternative viewpoints. Read extensively and be open to changing your mind. What does it feel like in your body when you aren't being true to yourself? This journey isn't just about avoiding darkness. It's about actively creating light. By embracing personal responsibility and developing these virtues, we move closer to wholeness, becoming more integrated and authentic individuals. What does it look like to create your own ethical code? Now take a moment to reflect. In what ways can you foster these virtues in your own life, and how would that impact your overall well-being? How would this impact your family, your job, your place in your community? If cultivating goodness can transform individuals, how can we harness the power of collective action to create a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world? We've established that empathy, moral courage, and critical thinking are essential defenses against the Lucifer effect and vital components of a meaningful life. But we're just scratching the surface. If personal goodness can transform individuals, how can we harness the power of collective action to create a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world? As we move forward, we'll explore specific strategies for collective action, emphasizing the importance of dialogue, empathy, and social justice. And here's what's really exciting. By taking the journey inward and integrating our shadows, we can positively impact our external surroundings and move toward greater societal integration. Stay with me, we're about to discover just how deeply personal and collective transformation are intertwined. We've established that even those who actively cultivate goodness are vulnerable to the Lucifer effect. But what about the darkness we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves? Carl Jung warned us of the dangers of the unacknowledged shadow, but what happens when we actively avoid confronting our inner demons? One of the primary defense mechanisms we use to avoid the discomfort of self-awareness is shadow projection, where we attribute our own unacceptable qualities to others, almost like a societal Lucifer effect on a personal level. Remember the Stanford prison experiment. The guards projected their own suppressed aggression onto the prisoners, justifying their cruel behavior. But how does this insidious process of shadow projection actually operate, and why is it so detrimental to both individuals and society as a whole? Shadow projection, at its core, is the unconscious act of attributing one's own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, and impulses to another person or group. As the saying goes, what we hate in others is often what we hate in ourselves. It's a way of externalizing our inner darkness, making it easier to condemn in someone else rather than confront within ourselves. Think of it this way. Projection acts like a psychological shield, deflecting uncomfortable truths about ourselves onto convenient targets. This allows the ego to maintain a sense of superiority and avoid the painful process of self-examination. Projection is a defense mechanism used to protect the ego from the discomfort of acknowledging undesirable aspects of oneself. It relies on psychological processes like denial, repression, and displacement. Denial is the outright refusal to acknowledge a painful truth. Repression is the unconscious pushing of unacceptable thoughts or feelings into the subconscious. And displacement is the redirection of emotions from a threatening target to a less threatening one. Consider a person who constantly accuses others of being angry. It might be that they are unconsciously repressing their own anger, which they find unacceptable, and projecting it onto those around them. Now consider a politician who constantly accuses their opponents of corruption. Is it possible that they are projecting their own unethical tendencies onto the other party to deflect scrutiny? It's crucial to differentiate between healthy empathy and unhealthy projection. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, to connect with their experience without losing sight of your own boundaries. Projection, on the other hand, is about attributing your own feelings and motivations to another person, often without any basis in reality. So, how do you tell the difference? Self-awareness is key. Empathy allows us to understand others. Projection allows us to misunderstand them and ourselves. Have you ever found yourself vehemently criticizing someone for a trait that, deep down, you know you possess? Projection manifests in countless ways in our daily lives. We blame others for our own mistakes, criticizing others for the very traits we dislike in ourselves. We idealize others, placing them on pedestals, to avoid acknowledging their flaws, which reflect our own imperfections. Think about the coworker who constantly blames their failures on others, never taking responsibility for their own actions. They might be projecting their own feelings of inadequacy and incompetence onto their colleagues. What does it feel like to work with that person? This insidious process damages interpersonal relationships, breeding conflict, misunderstanding, and a profound lack of intimacy. When we project our own issues onto others, we fail to see them as they truly are, and we create a barrier to genuine connection. Instead of engaging in open and honest communication, we interpret their actions through the lens of our own internal biases and insecurities. We see what we fear within ourselves, reflected back at us, even if it isn't there. How can true intimacy develop when our perception of others is distorted by our own unresolved issues? On a larger scale, projection fuels prejudice, discrimination, and political polarization. Scapegoating, the act of blaming an individual or group for the problems of society, is a classic example of collective shadow projection. Throughout history, marginalized groups have been targeted as convenient scapegoats, onto whom societies project their fears and anxieties. Consider the rise of extremist groups, fueled by hatred and resentment towards specific populations, or historical examples like the Salem witch trials, where societal anxieties were projected onto vulnerable women, leading to their persecution and execution. What happens to a society that gives in to projection? Throughout history, many leaders have blamed minority groups for the problems of society. Nazi Germany blamed Jewish people, Hutu extremists blamed Tutsis in Rwanda, and demagogues throughout history have used similar tactics to consolidate power. How do these examples shape our modern world? Mass media also encourages shadow projection by presenting simplified and often distorted representations of individuals and groups, fueling stereotypes and reinforcing existing prejudices. News outlets often focus on negative stories, amplifying fear and anxiety and encouraging viewers to project their own anxieties onto the other. Now consider social media algorithms which create echo chambers. What is the effect of only ever hearing one viewpoint? Projection creates the illusion of superiority by allowing individuals to distance themselves from their own darkness and see themselves as morally superior to those they project onto. We tell ourselves that we would never do that, conveniently ignoring the potential for such actions within ourselves. This, of course, hinders personal growth by preventing individuals from acknowledging and integrating their shadow, perpetuating destructive patterns. When we refuse to own our own darkness, we remain trapped in a cycle of denial and self-deception, unable to learn from our mistakes or develop true self-awareness. The long-term consequences of constant shadow projection are dire: an inability to connect with others authentically, a crippling inability to self-reflect, and the creation of enemies where there were none before. Consider a person who constantly projects their insecurities onto their partner, leading to constant arguments and a breakdown of trust. Over time, they may become isolated and unable to form meaningful relationships, trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage. Think about it. How much energy is expended creating and defending these projections? It's time for some self-reflection. Think about the times in your life when you negatively judged another person. What specific traits were you judging? And here's the unsettling question: do you possess those traits yourself, even in a small way? It's only by confronting our own projections that we can begin to break free from the cycle of judgment and cultivate true empathy and understanding. We've seen how shadow projection acts as a pervasive defense mechanism, hindering personal growth and contributing to societal problems. But here's the twist: shadow projection is so insidious because it reinforces the very darkness it seeks to disown. If shadow projection is so pervasive, how can we break the cycle and create a world where individuals are more self-aware, empathetic, and accountable for their actions? We are just beginning to scratch the surface. In the next section, we'll begin exploring specific strategies for breaking the cycle of projection, emphasizing the importance of self-awareness, dialogue, and social justice. Stay with me, because moving towards a more integrated self is also moving towards a more integrated society. We've seen how shadow projection acts as a pervasive defense mechanism, hindering personal growth and contributing to societal problems. But if the shadow is this insidious, then why does it seem so appealing? Why are we, despite our best intentions, drawn to the darkness within and without? What is it about the dark side that makes it so alluring, and why are we often drawn to things that we know are harmful or wrong? The allure of the shadow stems from several factors, including the desire for transgression, the fantasy of power, and the illusion of authenticity. Transgression offers a forbidden thrill, a chance to break free from societal norms and expectations, experiencing a sense of liberation and rebellion, even if it leads to negative consequences. It's the allure of the forbidden fruit, the excitement of venturing into uncharted territory, regardless of the potential dangers. The fantasy of power, on the other hand, whispers of control, dominance, and the ability to manipulate others, often stemming from underlying feelings of inadequacy or powerlessness. It's the illusion of being untouchable, of bending the world to one's will, a dangerous delusion fueled by insecurity. And then there's the illusion of authenticity, the seductive belief that embracing one's shadow is the key to being real or true to oneself, often masking underlying insecurities or a lack of self-awareness. It's the dangerous idea that being authentic means indulging every whim and impulse, regardless of the consequences. The allure of the shadow is cleverly portrayed in popular culture, such as the fascination with bad boys or anti-heroes in movies, TV shows, and literature. Think of James Bond, a morally ambiguous character who operates outside the law to achieve his goals, or the Joker, a chaotic force of nature who revels in anarchy and destruction. What makes these characters so compelling? They embody forbidden desires, challenge conventional morality, and offer a glimpse into the darker aspects of human nature. The media often glamorizes or romanticizes destructive behaviors, such as drug use, violence, or rebellion, contributing to the allure of the shadow. Advertising, too, exploits our shadow desires, promising power, control, or sexual gratification, often through manipulative and deceptive tactics. Consider the Marlboro Man, who epitomized rugged individualism and rebellious spirit, despite promoting a product known to cause cancer. This is the dangerous game of shadow marketing. And what about charismatic cult leaders like Jim Jones or Charles Manson? They may be obviously dangerous, yet they exert a powerful influence over their followers, tapping into their deepest fears and desires. The promise of belonging, power, and meaning can be incredibly seductive, even when the source is clearly malevolent. Understanding the allure of the shadow is crucial for resisting its seductive power and making conscious choices aligned with one's values and goals. How can we resist this pull? We can challenge the fantasy of power by cultivating empathy, practicing humility, and focusing on collaboration rather than competition. We can seek genuine authenticity through self-awareness, personal growth, and the pursuit of meaningful values, rather than simply embracing our shadow. And we can manage the desire for transgression by engaging in creative expression, setting healthy boundaries, and seeking out new experiences that are both challenging and ethical. What do you value most in life, and how can you live in alignment with those values, even when tempted by the allure of the shadow? If the shadow has such a strong allure, can it also be a source of wisdom and insight? Can we learn something valuable from exploring our own darkness and confronting our forbidden desires? Can understanding our dark side actually contribute to our overall wholeness? Despite its negative aspects, the shadow can be a profound source of wisdom and self-understanding. But what specific insights can we gain from exploring our shadow, and how can these insights help us to live more authentic, meaningful lives? How might the things we hide from ourselves become our greatest teachers? Exploring the shadow can provide valuable self-knowledge by revealing hidden motivations, repressed emotions, and unconscious patterns of behavior. By shining a light on these hidden aspects of ourselves, we can gain a deeper understanding of why we do the things we do and how we can change destructive patterns. Understanding one's shadow fosters empathy by allowing individuals to recognize and accept the darkness within themselves and others, reducing judgment and promoting compassion. When we acknowledge our own capacity for darkness, we become more tolerant and understanding of the flaws and imperfections of others. Shadow work also promotes self-acceptance by helping individuals to embrace their imperfections, forgive themselves for their mistakes, and cultivate a more balanced and integrated sense of self. We begin to see ourselves not as perfect beings, but as complex and flawed individuals worthy of love and acceptance. This process can even allow us to become a wounded healer, tapping into a Jungian archetype that embodies the ability to transform personal suffering into a source of wisdom and healing for others. There are many recorded instances of individuals who have undergone shadow work and experienced significant personal transformation, such as increased self-awareness, improved relationships, and a greater sense of purpose. Take, for example, the story of a woman who had struggled with anger and resentment for years. Through shadow work, she discovered that these emotions stemmed from childhood trauma and a deep-seated fear of vulnerability. By confronting these hidden aspects of herself, she was able to release her anger, forgive her abusers, and cultivate more loving and fulfilling relationships. Therapists, counselors, and spiritual guides use shadow work techniques to help their clients heal from trauma, overcome addiction, and cultivate greater self-acceptance. Psychological studies support the link between shadow integration, self-compassion, and psychological well-being. Research shows that individuals who have integrated their shadows tend to be more resilient, emotionally stable, and satisfied with their lives. And owning one's shadow traits is directly connected to increased confidence. Exploring the shadow requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself, but the rewards are well worth the effort. What does this process look like? There are practical strategies for engaging with the shadow, such as journaling, dream analysis, active imagination, and shadow work exercises. It's also important to seek support from trusted others, such as therapists, counselors, or spiritual guides, in the process of shadow integration. In our daily lives, we can integrate the shadow by setting healthy boundaries, practicing self-care, and engaging in activities that promote self-expression and creativity. Are you willing to take the journey inward to understand the depths of your shadow traits, both positive and negative? We've seen how exploring the shadow can lead to profound self-understanding, empathy, and acceptance. But this understanding brings us back to Jung's original warning. Ignoring the shadow has consequences, both individually and collectively. His message is incredibly relevant today. What are some final thoughts on shadow work? We are just beginning to scratch the surface. Up next, we'll explore shadow integration. Stay with me, because understanding one's own darkness is the first step toward illuminating the world. We've seen how exploring the shadow can lead to profound self-understanding, empathy, and acceptance. And as we integrate these insights, a crucial question emerges. Can these shadow dynamics be applied to groups, societies, or even countries? And if societies carry these deep-seated wounds, are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past? Echoing the wisdom of the wound, we turn our attention to the concept of a collective trauma shadow, acknowledging that societies, much like individuals, can carry deep-seated wounds from historical traumas. Just as an individual's unacknowledged shadow can lead to destructive behaviors, a society's unacknowledged trauma can manifest in cycles of violence, oppression, and injustice. So how do past atrocities and societal traumas continue to haunt the present, shaping our collective behavior and influencing our perceptions of the world? Is history truly in the past, or does its shadow continue to darken our present? The collective trauma shadow is the accumulation of unresolved grief, pain, and rage resulting from large-scale historical events such as wars, genocides, slavery, colonization, and systemic oppression. It's not simply a matter of remembering the past. It's about recognizing how the emotional residue of these events continues to shape our present-day attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. This shadow is transmitted across generations through cultural narratives, institutional practices, family dynamics, and even unconscious biases, influencing everything from political ideologies to interpersonal relationships. What this means is that even if we ourselves didn't directly experience these traumas, we can still be affected by their lingering effects. Consider how the stories we tell, the monuments we erect, and the laws we enact all reflect and perpetuate certain narratives about the past, often reinforcing existing power structures and inequalities. The collective trauma shadow can manifest in various forms, such as cycles of violence, systemic injustice, and a pervasive sense of anxiety or mistrust. Think of it as a societal echo chamber, where past traumas reverberate through the present, amplifying conflict and hindering progress. In some cases, it can lead to the scapegoating of minority groups, the rise of extremist ideologies, or even the outbreak of war. In other cases, it can manifest as a more subtle sense of unease, a lingering feeling that something is not right, even if we can't quite put our finger on it. But here's the twist. Recent research even points to the concept of epigenetic inheritance as a potential biological mechanism for transmitting trauma across generations. In other words, the experiences of our ancestors can literally alter our genes, making us more vulnerable to certain emotional and behavioral patterns. Could it be that we are not just products of our own experiences, but also inheritors of the traumas of those who came before us? To truly grasp the dynamics of the collective trauma shadow, let's turn to some specific historical examples. Consider the legacy of slavery in the United States, where racial inequality and systemic discrimination persist despite the abolition of slavery over 150 years ago. Even though slavery is no longer legal, its shadow continues to cast a long shadow over American society. Redlining, discriminatory lending practices, and racial profiling are just a few of the ways in which the effects of slavery continue to manifest in the present. Analyze how narratives, laws, and other social structures perpetuate trauma's effects. The very idea of race as a social construct, used to justify the enslavement and oppression of African people, continues to shape our perceptions and interactions today. Now, let's delve deeper into another example, the aftermath of the Holocaust, where the trauma experienced by survivors has been passed down to their children and grandchildren, influencing their relationships, identities, and worldviews. Studies have shown that the descendants of Holocaust survivors are more likely to experience anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. What's even more unsettling is that they may also carry a sense of unresolved grief, a feeling that something is missing, even if they don't know exactly what it is. This intergenerational trauma can manifest in various ways, such as a heightened sensitivity to issues of persecution and injustice, or a tendency to be overly protective of their loved ones. What does this tell us about the long-lasting effects of trauma and how it can shape the lives of generations to come? And let's now consider the intergenerational trauma experienced by indigenous populations as a result of colonization, forced assimilation, and cultural genocide. The forced removal of children from their families, the suppression of indigenous languages and cultures, and the denial of basic human rights have all had a devastating impact on indigenous communities around the world. This trauma plays a part in a range of social and health outcomes, such as high rates of suicide, substance abuse, and chronic disease. What makes this trauma so insidious is that it is often invisible, hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Yet, its effects are undeniable, perpetuating cycles of poverty, violence, and despair. The collective trauma shadow can hijack entire societies, leading to cycles of violence, oppression, and self-destruction, even when individuals have good intentions. This is how seemingly rational people can participate in irrational or even horrific acts. When a society is gripped by the collective trauma shadow, it becomes difficult to think clearly, to empathize with others, or to make sound decisions. It's as if the past is constantly pulling us back, preventing us from moving forward. The collective trauma shadow can distort our perceptions of reality, leading to biased decision-making, irrational fears, and a lack of empathy for others. We may become more likely to see the world in terms of us versus them, to demonize those who are different from us, or to resort to violence as a way of resolving conflict. Addressing the collective trauma shadow requires acknowledging the past, confronting uncomfortable truths, and engaging in collective healing processes. How can we begin to heal these wounds? It starts with creating spaces for dialogue, where people can share their stories and experiences without fear of judgment or reprisal. It also requires us to challenge the dominant narratives about the past, to recognize the perspectives of marginalized groups, and to hold ourselves accountable for our collective actions. And importantly, it demands systemic change, addressing the root causes of inequality and injustice. But here's the most fascinating part. This healing process is not just about the past. It's about creating a better future. So let's reflect on this. In what ways might the collective trauma shadow be influencing your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? Are there certain historical events or societal traumas that trigger strong emotional reactions in you? Do you find yourself repeating patterns of behavior that seem to be rooted in the past? Understanding how the collective trauma shadow operates is the first step toward breaking free from its grip. We've explored how these past traumas continue to shape our present and future. But if the collective trauma shadow has such a powerful influence, how can we break free from its grip and create a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world? Can we begin to heal the wounds of the past and reclaim our shared history? Up next, we'll begin to explore specific strategies for collective healing, emphasizing the importance of dialogue, empathy, and social justice. Are you ready to work through these issues as a community? Stay with me, because understanding these collective scars is a key to unlocking a more compassionate future. We've seen how the collective trauma shadow can hijack entire societies, leading to cycles of violence and self-destruction, even when individuals possess good intentions. But if our societies are indeed haunted by these deep-seated wounds, are we merely condemned to repeat the mistakes of the past, or can we actively break free from this cycle? Is collective healing just a passive hope, a distant dream, or can it be something more? Collective healing is not a passive hope or a distant dream. It's an active and ongoing process that requires conscious effort, unwavering commitment, and genuine collaboration. It demands that we confront uncomfortable truths, challenge deeply ingrained biases, and actively cultivate empathy and understanding. The question then becomes, what specific actions, attitudes, and approaches can we cultivate to foster collective healing within our communities, our nations, and the world at large? How can we truly sow the seeds of change that will transform our societies from the inside out, creating a future where such traumas are less likely to take root? At its core, collective healing rests on three essential pillars: dialogue, empathy, and restorative justice. Each pillar is a cornerstone upon which we can build a more just and compassionate society. Dialogue, in this context, isn't just casual conversation. It's a process of open, honest, and respectful communication between individuals and groups holding differing perspectives. What this means is that it requires a willingness to listen, to truly hear and understand the experiences of others, even when those experiences challenge our own beliefs. Dialogue fosters understanding, bridges divides, and builds trust, creating a foundation for collective action. Empathy goes beyond simply acknowledging the suffering of others. It's the ability to understand and share their feelings, particularly those who have experienced trauma, oppression, or injustice. It's about putting ourselves in their shoes, seeing the world through their eyes, and recognizing their inherent worth and dignity. Empathy is not just a feeling. It's a skill that can be cultivated through conscious effort. By actively listening to the stories of others, challenging our own biases, and seeking out diverse perspectives, we can expand our capacity for empathy and create a more compassionate world. Empathy fosters compassion, reduces prejudice, and promotes pro-social behavior, allowing us to connect with others on a deeper level and work together to create positive change. Restorative justice provides a framework for addressing harm that focuses on repairing relationships, restoring communities, and holding offenders accountable, rather than simply punishing them. It recognizes that crime is not just a violation of the law, it's a violation of people and relationships. Restorative justice seeks to heal the wounds caused by crime, to address the underlying needs of victims and offenders, and to create a more just and equitable society. By emphasizing accountability, repairing harm, and reintegrating offenders back into the community, restorative justice can help to break the cycle of violence and create a more peaceful and harmonious society. But what about radical forgiveness? Is it helpful or harmful when considering collective trauma? The concept of radical forgiveness can be helpful, yet fraught with potential pitfalls when applied to collective healing. Forgiveness, in its truest sense, can be a powerful tool for releasing anger, resentment, and the desire for revenge, which can perpetuate cycles of violence and conflict. However, radical forgiveness, particularly when applied prematurely or without genuine acknowledgement of harm, can also be deeply harmful. It can minimize the suffering of victims, excuse the actions of perpetrators, and prevent genuine accountability. Think about it. If a society collectively forgives its oppressors without addressing the root causes of oppression, without acknowledging the ongoing harm caused by systemic injustice, does it truly heal? Or does it simply sweep the trauma under the rug, allowing it to fester and resurface in new and insidious ways? Forgiveness, in the context of collective healing, must be earned through genuine remorse, accountability, and a commitment to repairing the harm caused. The question is, how does forgiving someone for what they have done affect you, and how does it affect the group? Often, personal forgiveness is key, but systemic acknowledgement is crucial to prevent future harms and to foster true collective healing. To see how dialogue, empathy, and restorative justice can work in practice, let's examine some real-world examples of collective healing initiatives. Consider the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which brought together victims and perpetrators of apartheid to share their stories, acknowledge the past, and promote healing and reconciliation. This commission provided a platform for victims to speak their truth, to confront their oppressors, and to begin the long and difficult process of healing. It also offered amnesty to perpetrators who confessed their crimes and demonstrated genuine remorse. What made the TRC so powerful was its commitment to truth-telling. By creating a space for victims and perpetrators to share their stories, The commission helped to uncover the full extent of the atrocities committed during apartheid. This truth-telling process was essential for acknowledging the past, for validating the experiences of victims, and for creating a foundation for reconciliation. However, the TRC was not without its critics. Some argued that it did not go far enough in holding perpetrators accountable, that the amnesty process was too lenient, and that the commission failed to address the underlying economic inequalities that fueled apartheid. How do we balance the need for truth-telling with the need for accountability? Now let's consider restorative justice programs in schools and communities that focus on repairing harm, resolving conflict, and building relationships, rather than simply punishing offenders. These programs bring together victims, offenders, and community members to discuss the harm that has been caused, to identify ways to repair that harm, and to create a plan for moving forward. Restorative justice circles, for example, provide a safe and structured space for dialogue, allowing participants to share their experiences, express their feelings, and work together to find solutions. These programs have been shown to be effective in reducing recidivism, improving relationships, and creating safer and more supportive communities. However, they also face challenges. Some critics argue that they are too lenient on offenders, that they do not adequately address the needs of victims, and that they are not appropriate for all types of crime. What these programs also reveal is how vital it is to adapt restorative justice principles to different contexts and cultures, ensuring that they are culturally sensitive and responsive to the needs of all participants. Are there other initiatives that may have a greater impact? Consider intergroup dialogue initiatives that bring together individuals from different racial, ethnic, or religious backgrounds to share their experiences, challenge stereotypes, and build bridges of understanding. These initiatives provide a space for people to connect with others who are different from them, to learn about their cultures and perspectives, and to challenge their own biases and assumptions. Through dialogue, participants can begin to see each other as individuals, rather than as members of a stereotyped group, to build relationships based on mutual respect and understanding, and to work together to address issues of inequality and injustice. These initiatives can face challenges in overcoming deeply ingrained prejudices and stereotypes. Some participants may be resistant to change, unwilling to listen to others, or unable to challenge their own biases. It's important to create a safe and supportive environment where participants feel comfortable sharing their experiences and expressing their feelings, and to provide skilled facilitators who can guide the dialogue and help participants to navigate difficult conversations. All of these initiatives and programs demonstrate the potential that is possible with the right focus and support. Collective healing is a long and challenging process that requires sustained effort, resilience, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. There will be setbacks and disappointments along the way, moments when it feels like progress is impossible. Yet, it's important to remember that even small victories can make a big difference, that every act of dialogue, empathy, and restorative justice contributes to the healing process. We must celebrate the progress that has been made, recognize the resilience of those who have been affected by trauma, and continue to work towards a more just and compassionate world. Potential obstacles to collective healing range from resistance to change, denial of past injustices, and the persistence of prejudice and discrimination. These obstacles can be deeply entrenched, rooted in centuries of oppression and inequality. Overcoming them requires a multifaceted approach that addresses both individual attitudes and systemic structures. It requires us to challenge the dominant narratives about the past, to amplify the voices of marginalized groups, and to hold ourselves accountable for our collective actions. But more than anything, we must not be afraid to confront the uncomfortable truths about our history and our present, to acknowledge the harm that has been caused, and to commit to repairing that harm. But here's where things get truly interesting. How can you contribute to the process of collective healing in your own community or nation? One way is to support local initiatives that are working to promote dialogue, empathy, and restorative justice. This could involve volunteering your time, donating money, or simply spreading awareness about these initiatives. Another way is to engage in dialogue with those who hold different perspectives, to challenge your own biases, and to seek out diverse voices and experiences. And importantly, you can advocate for policies that promote justice and equity, that address the root causes of inequality and oppression, and that create a more just and compassionate society for all. We've explored how collective healing can help us to address the wounds of the past, acknowledging how dialogue, empathy, and restorative justice are essential tools for addressing historical traumas, promoting reconciliation, and creating more just and equitable societies. But if we can heal the wounds of the past, how can we create a more resilient future where such traumas are less likely to occur? Can we build societies that are more resistant to the forces of division, hatred, and violence? We'll examine the importance of education, social justice, and global cooperation. Stay with me, because what we'll discover next is even more shocking as we explore strategies for not just collective healing, but for actively preventing future traumas, creating a world where the shadows of the past no longer darken our future. We've discovered that we can heal the wounds of the past and create a more resilient future. But if we can build societies that are more resistant to the forces of division, hatred, and violence, are we truly addressing the underlying issue? How can we reconcile this internal division and align our conscious goals with our unconscious drives to create a more integrated and fulfilling life, and contribute to a more harmonious world? This is where we begin to understand the divided self. The divided self is characterized by a fundamental lack of alignment between our conscious desires and our often hidden unconscious motivations. What this means is that despite our best intentions and deliberate efforts, we may find ourselves repeatedly sabotaging our own success, experiencing persistent internal conflict, and struggling to achieve a genuine sense of well-being. This division stems from the repression and denial of aspects of our shadow self. Remember, these disowned parts don't simply disappear. They continue to exert influence from the unconscious, often undermining our conscious efforts. This is the battlefield within. Consider this. Our conscious mind may strive for success, happiness, and fulfilling relationships. Yet unconscious fears, traumas, and repressed emotions can create a powerful undercurrent that pulls us in the opposite direction. This manifests in a multitude of ways. Procrastination becomes a daily struggle, anxiety a constant companion, depression a heavy weight, and addictions a desperate attempt to numb the pain. Relationship problems surface as we unconsciously recreate patterns of behavior that push away the very intimacy we consciously crave. In essence, the divided self is a state of internal war, where our conscious intentions are constantly battling against our unconscious drives, leading to exhaustion, frustration, and a diminished sense of self. The way to end this war is through individuation. This brings us to the Jungian concept of individuation. Individuation is the psychological process of integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of the self, moving towards wholeness and self-realization. Jung believed that true psychological health requires us to acknowledge and integrate our shadow selves, rather than suppressing or denying them. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. It's about embracing the totality of our being, including both the light and the dark aspects of our nature. To truly grasp the impact of the divided self, let's examine some concrete examples of how it manifests in everyday life. Consider the individual who consciously desires success, pouring countless hours into their work, yet consistently sabotages their own efforts. What could be the cause? Perhaps, unconsciously, they harbor a deep-seated fear of failure, or an even more insidious fear of success, believing they don't deserve it or that it will bring unwanted attention. Or picture a person who consciously values intimacy, longing for a deep and meaningful connection with a partner. Yet, unconsciously, they push away potential partners, creating distance and sabotaging any chance of lasting love. This may be due to a fear of vulnerability, a past trauma that has left them guarded, or a belief that they are unworthy of love. These are not isolated incidents. They are common experiences that reflect the internal conflict and self-sabotage that characterize the divided self. Think about the individual who feels stuck in negative patterns of behavior despite consciously wanting to change. They may know intellectually that their actions are harmful, yet they seem powerless to break free. This is because their unconscious mind is operating from a different set of beliefs and motivations, often rooted in past experiences and repressed emotions. These conflicting inner voices can affect one's decision-making, leading to impulsive choices, irrational fears, and a general sense of being out of control. It's as if there are two people living within the same body, each with their own agenda. Great works of literature and cinema often explore the psychological dynamics of internal conflict. Take Dr. Obert Louis Stevenson, Mr. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, A Chill Dr. G. Portrayal of the divided self. Dr. Jekyll, a respected physician, consciously strives for goodness and moral rectitude. Yet he also harbors a secret desire for the darker impulses of human nature, leading him to create a potion that unleashes his Mr. Tao self in the form of Mr. Hyde. Hyde embodies all the repressed emotions, dark impulses, and destructive tendencies that Jekyll consciously denies. As Hyde gains more power, Jekyll struggles to control his shadow self, ultimately leading to his demise. The tale of Jekyll and Hyde is not just a fictional story. It's a powerful metaphor for the internal conflict that exists within each of us, the struggle between our conscious and unconscious selves. Jungian analysts and other therapists have documented countless case studies that illustrate the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self. These case studies reveal that shadow work is not always easy or comfortable, but it is essential for achieving psychological wholeness. Through dream analysis, active imagination, and other therapeutic techniques, individuals can confront their shadow selves, understand their unconscious motivations, and begin to integrate these disowned aspects of their personalities. This integration is not about eliminating the shadow, but about acknowledging its existence and harnessing its energy for constructive purposes. When understood, darkness can illuminate the light. So, how do we bridge this divide and begin the journey toward wholeness? Integrating the divided self requires a multifaceted approach that begins with acknowledging and accepting our shadow aspects. This means taking an honest look at the parts of ourselves that we dislike, reject, or try to hide. What are your worst qualities? What are your most shameful secrets? Exploring our unconscious motivations is equally important. What drives our behavior? What are we really seeking when we make certain choices? Are our conscious goals aligned with our authentic values? What are the steps to bridging that gap? Here are some practical strategies for bridging the divide between conscious and unconscious. Journaling provides a powerful tool for gaining self-awareness. Writing down our thoughts and feelings without censorship or judgment can help us to identify patterns of behavior and uncover hidden motivations. Dream analysis offers another avenue for understanding the messages from our unconscious mind. Dreams often contain symbolic representations of our shadow aspects, providing valuable insights into our inner world. Active imagination involves engaging with our unconscious through visualization and creative expression. By allowing ourselves to freely imagine and interact with our shadow figures, we can begin to understand their needs and desires. Shadow work exercises, guided meditations, and mindfulness practices can all help us to identify and integrate disowned aspects of the self. And mindfulness meditation, the simple act of paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judgment, can help us to become more aware of our internal landscape and develop a greater sense of self-compassion. Remember, self-compassion and patience are essential in the process of integration. This is a lifelong journey, not a quick fix. There will be times when we stumble, when we fall back into old patterns of behavior, and when we feel overwhelmed by the darkness within. But it's important to remember that these challenges are a natural part of the process. Each step we take towards self-awareness and integration brings us closer to wholeness. By understanding our conflicting desires, we can become more complete people, more authentic, and more aligned with our true selves. In what areas of your life do you feel most divided, and what steps can you take to begin integrating those conflicting aspects of yourself? What will you do today to understand your conflicting desires so you can become a more complete person? If integrating the divided self can lead to greater wholeness and well-being, can we truly transform darkness into light? Can we harness the energy of the shadow for creative and constructive purposes, both individually and collectively? Stay with me, because what we'll discover next is even more fascinating as we delve into concepts about the transformative power of shadow integration. We've come to understand that true wholeness requires integrating the divided self, acknowledging and accepting our shadow aspects, and harnessing the energy of the shadow for creative and constructive purposes. But can we truly achieve this wholeness by only embracing the positive aspects of ourselves while trying to repress the shadow? Is integration simply a matter of balancing light and darkness, or is there a deeper paradox at play? Can we truly become complete if we selectively curate our inner world, accepting only what we deem good and rejecting what we label as bad? A key aspect of embracing wholeness lies in recognizing the limits of our conscious control and surrendering to the unknowable aspects of life. What this means is not that we abandon personal responsibility or ethical behavior, but rather that we acknowledge the inherent uncertainties and unpredictability of existence. Life, in its essence, is a dance between order and chaos, control and surrender. Can we truly dictate every outcome, mold every experience to our liking? Can we eliminate all suffering, eradicate all negativity from our lives? The attempt to control or eliminate the shadow can lead to rigidity, repression, and a diminished capacity for joy and spontaneity. Think of a tightly wound spring. The more force you exert to keep it compressed, the more energy it stores, and the more violently it will snap back when released. Similarly, the more we try to suppress our shadow, the more likely it is to erupt in unexpected and destructive ways. This repression not only limits our capacity for emotional expression, but also stifles our creativity and intuition, preventing us from fully embracing the richness and complexity of life. But is there another way? Consider the concept of creative tension, the dynamic interplay between opposing forces that fuels growth, innovation, and transformation. It's like the tension between the strings of a violin and the bow that draws across them. Without the tension, there is no music. Similarly, the tension between our conscious intentions and our unconscious drives, between our light and our shadow, can be a source of immense creative energy, propelling us forward on our journey of self-discovery and individuation. It's important to remember the saying, "This too shall pass," as this touches on the theme of surrendering to the unknowable. This saying is not just about enduring difficult times. It's an acknowledgement that everything, both good and bad, is transient. To better understand this concept, let's turn to the Taoist philosophy of yin and yang, a powerful example of embracing paradox. Yin and yang represent seemingly opposite forces: darkness and light, passivity and activity, femininity and masculinity, yet they are interconnected and interdependent. Neither can exist without the other. They are two sides of the same coin, constantly flowing and transforming into one another. Imagine a circle divided into two equal halves, one black yin and one white yang, with a small dot of the opposite color in each half. This symbolizes the idea that even in the darkest of times, there is a seed of light, and even in the brightest of moments, there is a shadow of darkness. Now, let's analyze how the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, effortless action, embodies the principle of surrendering to the natural flow of life, rather than trying to force or control it. Wu Wei is not about passivity or inaction. It's about aligning ourselves with the Tao, the underlying principle of the universe, and allowing things to unfold naturally. Think of a skilled sailor who understands the currents and winds, and uses them to navigate the sea, rather than trying to fight against them. Similarly, by surrendering to the natural flow of life, we can achieve our goals with greater ease and effectiveness. The Taoist approach to conflict resolution emphasizes finding balance and harmony, rather than seeking to dominate or defeat one's opponent. In martial arts, for example, the principle of yin and yang is used to neutralize an opponent's force by yielding and redirecting it, rather than meeting it head-on. This is also a metaphor for how opposites are actually part of the same whole. Consider the inhale and exhale of breath, the contraction and expansion of muscles, the systole and diastole of the heart. These are all examples of opposing forces that work together to sustain life. Consider the changing seasons, the ebb and flow of the tides, the life cycle of a plant. All these natural phenomena illustrate the paradoxical nature of existence. Winter with its cold and darkness gives way to spring with its warmth and light. The tide ebbs, revealing the seabed, and then flows, covering it once again. A seed sprouts, grows into a plant, produces flowers and fruit, and then dies, returning to the earth to nourish new life. This too shall pass acknowledges both the good and the bad, the joy and the sorrow, the triumphs and the failures. Embracing paradox and surrendering to the unknowable can lead to greater inner peace, resilience, and a deeper appreciation for the beauty and complexity of life. By accepting that life is not always fair, that suffering is inevitable, and that we cannot control everything, we can free ourselves from the tyranny of expectations and the constant striving for control. Cultivating acceptance involves practicing mindfulness, embracing uncertainty, and letting go of the need for control. Mindfulness helps us to be present in the moment, without judgment, allowing us to observe our thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them. Embracing uncertainty means accepting that we don't have all the answers and that life is full of surprises, both good and bad. Moreover, self-compassion and forgiveness are essential in the process of integrating the shadow and accepting one's imperfections. We are all flawed human beings, and we all make mistakes. But instead of beating ourselves up for our shortcomings, we can learn to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding, just as we would treat a friend who is going through a difficult time. We need to learn to forgive ourselves for our past transgressions and move forward with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. What practical advice can we take? For navigating difficult emotions, such as fear, anger, or grief, allow yourself to feel them fully without trying to suppress or eliminate them. Acknowledge their presence, explore their origins, and learn from their messages. So how can you begin to embrace paradox and cultivate greater acceptance in your own life, even when faced with uncertainty or adversity? How can you find the balance between striving for your goals and surrendering to the natural flow of life? How can you embrace your imperfections and treat yourself with greater compassion and forgiveness? As we reflect on the wisdom of embracing paradox, let us remember that true wholeness is not about eliminating darkness, but about integrating light and shadow, good and evil, conscious and unconscious. It's about accepting the inherent uncertainties and unpredictability of existence and surrendering to the natural flow of life. What enduring questions do these truths leave us to ponder? As we continue on this path of self-discovery, what awaits us just beyond the next bend? Stay with me, because as we move into the final sections of this video, we will return to Carl Jung's warning to humanity and delve deeper into the path to liberation. We've established that true wholeness isn't just about balancing the light and dark within us, but about integrating them into a unified self. But is it possible that something else, something far more insidious, is preventing us from seeing this wholeness, from achieving true self-knowledge? Could it be that we are trapped, not by our shadows, but by the very beliefs we hold so dear? How do our beliefs, often formed unconsciously, shape our reality and prevent us from recognizing the truth about ourselves and the world around us? Are we truly seeing things as they are, or as we believe them to be? Our beliefs act as filters, selectively processing information that confirms our existing worldview, while conveniently ignoring or dismissing anything that contradicts it. What this means is that we're not objective observers of reality, but rather active participants in constructing it. We seek out and interpret information that supports our pre-existing beliefs, even if those beliefs are inaccurate or harmful. This, in essence, is confirmation bias, the tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs and to disregard information that contradicts them. To put it simply, confirmation bias is the deeply ingrained habit of cherry-picking the data that validates our point of view, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of belief. But confirmation bias is only one piece of the puzzle. We also have to consider the impact of cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking that distort our perception of reality and contribute to negative emotions. Think of it like this. Imagine a funhouse mirror that distorts your reflection, making you appear taller, shorter, wider, or thinner than you actually are. Cognitive distortions act in a similar way, twisting our thoughts and feelings, leading to inaccurate and often negative interpretations of events. Common cognitive distortions include black and white thinking, where we see things as either good or bad, with no middle ground. Catastrophizing, where we exaggerate the potential consequences of negative events. And personalization, where we blame ourselves for things that are not our fault. The discomfort we experience when confronted with information that contradicts our beliefs leads us to rationalize or deny the inconsistency. This is known as cognitive dissonance, and it highlights the lengths we will go to protect our existing worldview. How can constant exposure to social media strengthen confirmation bias and cognitive distortions, further reinforcing our pre-existing beliefs and isolating us from diverse perspectives? These biases and distortions manifest in countless ways in our daily lives. For example, people often choose to watch news channels or follow social media accounts that confirm their political beliefs, creating an echo chamber where dissenting voices are systematically silenced. But here's the twist. What happens when individuals interpret ambiguous events in a way that confirms their pre-existing fears or anxieties, leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy? A perfect example of this are groups that view outsiders negatively based on limited information, perpetuating stereotypes and fueling prejudice. Political polarization and social division are fueled by confirmation bias and the tendency to demonize those who hold different beliefs. The media often exploits our cognitive biases, sensationalizing stories and presenting information in a way that confirms our existing prejudices, further exacerbating social divisions. Think of it as a societal hall of mirrors. Consider the psychological studies conducted by researchers like Peter Ditto, who have consistently demonstrated the power of confirmation bias in shaping our judgments and decisions. Ditto's work has shown that we are more likely to accept information that supports our beliefs, even if it is flawed or unreliable, and to reject information that contradicts our beliefs, even if it is well supported by evidence. Furthermore, expand on the concept of groupthink and how that plays a role in confirming one's biases, as groupthink often amplifies existing biases and discourages critical thinking. So, what does all of this mean? The implication is that we are not as rational or objective as we think we are. Breaking free from the prison of perception requires a conscious effort to question our assumptions, challenge our beliefs, and embrace intellectual humility. What this means is that we must be willing to step outside of our comfort zones and consider perspectives that differ from our own. One thing we can do to overcome confirmation bias and cognitive distortions is to actively seek out diverse perspectives and engage in respectful dialogue with those who hold different views. Another is to actively look for evidence that contradicts our beliefs and be willing to change our minds in light of new information. Practicing mindfulness and observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment allows us to become more aware of our biases and distortions. Considering opinions that may challenge one's view will open you to new information and is also an act of humility. Emphasizing the importance of intellectual humility, recognizing that we are all limited in our knowledge and understanding, we can always learn from others. How can you begin to challenge your own assumptions and cultivate greater intellectual humility in your daily life? What steps can you take to break free from the echo chambers of your own mind and engage with the world in a more open and objective way? As we reflect on the power of our beliefs to shape our reality, what new perspectives might emerge? The key takeaway is that our beliefs can limit our ability to see the world clearly, and that questioning our assumptions is essential for personal growth and societal progress. But that's not the whole story. While confirmation bias and cognitive distortions can certainly distort our perception of reality, they don't fully explain the underlying forces that shape our beliefs and perceptions. So, what exactly are these underlying forces, and how do they influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? What lies beneath the surface of our conscious awareness, driving our decisions and shaping our destinies in ways we may not even realize? Stay with me, because we're about to delve into the deepest recesses of the human psyche, exploring the enduring power of the unconscious mind. We've established that our beliefs can create a prison of perception, limiting our ability to see the world clearly. But what if our conscious beliefs are merely the bars of the cell, and something far more powerful acts as the jailer, wielding ultimate control? If our conscious minds are only the tip of the iceberg, what lies beneath the surface of the unconscious, and how does it shape our shadow and influence our actions? In Jungian psychology, the unconscious is not merely a dusty attic filled with forgotten memories, but a vast and dynamic ocean teeming with life. It's a realm containing our deepest instincts, primal archetypes, and the collective wisdom accumulated throughout human history. What this means is that the unconscious operates autonomously, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without our conscious awareness or control. The shadow, residing primarily within this hidden realm, is comprised not only of repressed aspects of our individual personalities, but also darker archetypes from the collective unconscious. Think of archetypes as universal patterns of behavior and imagery, inherited from our ancestors, shaping our perceptions and experiences. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the shadow, these are all archetypes deeply embedded in the human psyche. While the personal unconscious holds our individual repressed emotions and desires, the collective unconscious connects us to the entire human race, a shared reservoir of primordial images and instincts. It's a concept so profound that it suggests our individual shadows are not entirely our own, but rather echoes of the darkness that has plagued humanity for millennia. Stay with me, because this is crucial to understanding Jung's warning. But how does this invisible realm manifest in our everyday lives? The unconscious whispers to us in many subtle yet powerful ways. Consider dreams. Jung believed that dreams are not random firings of the brain, but rather symbolic messages from the unconscious, revealing hidden desires, fears, and conflicts. Common dream symbols, like water representing the emotions or a journey symbolizing personal growth, can offer profound insights into our inner world. Think about it. Have you ever had a recurring dream that left you feeling uneasy or confused? It might be your unconscious trying to communicate something important. Slips of the tongue, often called Freudian slips, are another manifestation of the unconscious. A seemingly innocent misstatement can reveal our true thoughts and feelings, even if we consciously try to hide them. What about spontaneous behaviors? How often do we act impulsively, driven by motivations we don't fully understand? A sudden outburst of anger, an irrational decision, or a self-sabotaging behavior can all be traced back to unconscious desires and conflicts. Synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem too improbable to be mere chance, might be another way the unconscious communicates with us. Could the universe be sending us symbolic messages through these events, guiding us on our path? Consider how art taps into the unconscious. Artistic expression provides an outlet for unconscious material. The raw emotion displayed in some art pieces reveals a deeper meaning when attributed to the unconscious mind taking over. Have you ever found yourself acting in ways that directly contradicted your conscious intentions? Self-sabotaging behaviors in relationships, or even in your professional life, are prime examples of the unconscious taking the wheel. These patterns often emerge from repressed fears or unresolved traumas, silently dictating our choices despite our best efforts. Think of someone who consciously desires a loving relationship, yet repeatedly chooses partners who are emotionally unavailable or abusive. A Jungian analyst might suggest that this individual is unconsciously reenacting patterns from their childhood, seeking to resolve old wounds through repetition. The unconscious is a powerful and underestimated force, and that force is a primordial ocean. But here is where the story gets particularly interesting and potentially disturbing. Within the collective unconscious, archetypes exist across a spectrum of light and shadow. While we often discuss the positive archetypes, like the wise old man or the great mother, there are also darker archetypes that exert a powerful influence on our shadow selves. Consider the archetype of the devouring mother, a negative aspect of the maternal archetype that represents an overbearing, controlling, or even destructive force. Or the archetype of the senex, the negative old man archetype that represents rigidity, tyranny, and a resistance to change. These darker archetypes, residing deep within the collective unconscious, can fuel our own destructive tendencies, influencing our behaviors and shaping our perceptions of the world. They are a part of our human inheritance, the echoes of generations of struggles, traumas, and unacknowledged darkness. How does recognizing these darker archetypes change the way we see our own shadows? Recognizing the immense power of the unconscious requires a fundamental shift in perspective. It demands we move away from the illusion of complete conscious control and embrace a greater humility, accepting the limits of our awareness and rationality. This shift can lead to increased empathy for ourselves and others. This happens when we recognize that we're all subject to unconscious forces and more than likely struggle with unconscious motivations and desires. Cultivating self-reflection, introspection, and a deep commitment to understanding our unconscious motivations becomes paramount. But how can we begin to cultivate greater humility and openness to the unconscious forces that shape our lives? Start by paying attention to your dreams. Keep a journal and record any recurring themes or symbols that stand out. Explore your emotional responses to different situations and ask yourself why you react the way you do. Engage in active imagination, a Jungian technique that involves consciously interacting with images and figures from your unconscious. And most importantly, be willing to confront the darker aspects of your personality, the repressed emotions and shadow qualities that you'd rather ignore. As Jung himself said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. If the unconscious is such a powerful force, how can we learn to work with it rather than against it? How can we integrate the shadow and harness its energy for creative and constructive purposes? In the next section, we'll explore specific techniques for shadow integration, learning how to bring the unconscious into the light and unlock its hidden potential. Stay with me, because what we're about to discuss is a life-changing lesson. We've explored the power of the unconscious and how it shapes our individual shadows. But what if this very same hidden realm can be deliberately manipulated on a grand scale, influencing entire societies? If the unconscious architect of our individual shadow is so powerful, consider the implications if that architect were an engineer, designing shadows for entire populations. How can the collective shadow be deliberately manipulated, and what are the consequences for individual freedom and societal well-being? Propaganda, political rhetoric, and media narratives can be strategically used to tap into the collective shadow, manipulating people's fears, prejudices, and unconscious desires. This isn't about rational persuasion. It's about bypassing conscious thought and appealing directly to the primal instincts that lie dormant within us all. Those in power can consciously exploit archetypes and symbols from the collective unconscious to manufacture consent and control populations. Think of it as a form of mass hypnosis, where carefully crafted narratives bypass our critical faculties and plant seeds of fear, division, and obedience directly into our unconscious minds. Consider the specific tactics employed to manipulate the collective shadow. Scapegoating, where a particular group is blamed for society's problems, is a classic example. This tactic preys on our innate tendency to identify with an in-group and demonize out-groups, channeling collective anger and frustration towards a designated enemy. Othering, the dehumanization or demonization of those who are different, is another powerful tool. By portraying certain groups as less than human, it becomes easier to justify discrimination, violence, and even genocide. Creating a moral panic around a perceived threat, whether it's a manufactured crisis or a genuine concern blown out of proportion, can also be effective. By stoking fear and anxiety, those in power can justify repressive measures and consolidate their control. These tactics are all carefully designed to appeal to primal instincts such as fear, tribalism, and aggression, bypassing rational thought and tapping into the raw emotional power of the collective shadow. It's shadow possession on a societal scale. History is replete with examples of societal manipulation through the collective shadow. Consider the use of propaganda in Nazi Germany to demonize Jews and justify the Holocaust. Through carefully crafted images, slogans, and narratives, the Nazi regime tapped into existing anti-Semitic prejudices, portraying Jews as a threat to the purity and well-being of the Aryan race. This created an environment of fear and hatred that ultimately led to the systematic extermination of millions of innocent people. The exploitation of racial prejudice in the Jim Crow South to maintain social control is another chilling example. By perpetuating the myth of black inferiority, white supremacists justified segregation, discrimination, and violence against African Americans for generations. The manipulation of fear and xenophobia to justify wars and military interventions is a recurring theme throughout history. From the weapons of mass destruction narrative used to justify the invasion of Iraq to the constant drumbeat of fear surrounding terrorism, those in power have repeatedly exploited our anxieties to rally support for military action. And today, we see the use of social media to spread misinformation and sow division in democratic societies. Foreign actors and domestic extremists use social media platforms to amplify existing divisions, spread conspiracy theories, and undermine trust in democratic institutions. But consider the role of cultural touchstones. From songs to slogans to images, propagandists have learned to weaponize cultural touchstones. What does this mean? It means twisting those things we find familiar and comforting into tools for division and control. Even celebrities, intentionally or unintentionally, play a role in weaponizing propaganda. Their endorsements, their opinions, their very presence can be used to sway public opinion and normalize harmful narratives. Consider how a celebrity might promote a particular product or political candidate, lending their credibility and influence to a cause, regardless of its true merit. Recognizing and resisting societal manipulation requires cultivating discernment, critical thinking, and media literacy. We must become more aware of the ways in which our own unconscious biases and fears are being exploited by external forces. This means actively seeking out diverse sources of information and avoiding echo chambers, where we only hear opinions that confirm our existing beliefs. It means questioning authority and challenging dominant narratives, refusing to blindly accept what we are told by those in power. It means developing a strong sense of personal values and ethical principles, providing a moral compass to guide our decisions. And it means practicing mindfulness and emotional regulation, learning to recognize and manage our own emotional responses to potentially manipulative messaging. How can you become more aware of the ways in which your own shadow is being manipulated by external forces, and what steps can you take to resist this influence? It's about taking control, reclaiming our minds, and building a more just and transparent society. It requires collective action. It's not enough to simply protect ourselves. We must also actively challenge manipulation and advocate for a more just and transparent society. This might involve supporting organizations that promote media literacy and critical thinking, speaking out against injustice and inequality, or simply engaging in thoughtful conversations with friends and family members about the issues that matter most. We've explored how the collective shadow can be deliberately exploited to control populations, but here's the twist. Recognizing the manipulation is only half the battle. The real key lies in taking responsibility for our own inner world, integrating our own shadows, and becoming more conscious of the unconscious forces that drive our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. But we're just scratching the surface. In the video's conclusion, we'll emphasize the importance of shadow integration for personal and societal well-being. Stay with me. The most profound insights are yet to come. As we draw to a close in our examination of the shadow, let's take a moment to synthesize the threads we've woven throughout this exploration of the human psyche. We've traversed the depths of the unconscious, grappling with uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us. Now, it's time to consider the implications of what we've uncovered and the path forward that Jung illuminated for us. In essence, we've explored the pervasive nature of the shadow, that hidden aspect of ourselves containing both destructive tendencies and untapped potential. We've seen how ignoring this shadow doesn't make it disappear, but rather amplifies its power, leading to both individual suffering and societal dysfunction. But we've also seen that integrating the shadow, understanding and harnessing its energy is the key to unlocking creativity, wholeness, and a more authentic way of being. We have shown that acknowledging both the individual and collective shadow is not merely a personal endeavor, but a crucial step towards a more conscious and compassionate world. This journey isn't about achieving perfection. It's about embracing the entirety of our being, light and dark alike. Remember those unsettling questions we posed at the beginning about the darker realities of human nature and the potential for evil within each of us. Remember Jung's warning about the catastrophic consequences of ignoring the shadow, a warning that history has repeatedly validated, from the horrors of the Holocaust to the insidious manipulations of modern propaganda. As we discussed, the Lucifer effect reminds us that even good people are susceptible to the corrupting influence of systems and ideologies. Recognizing these realities is not an exercise in despair, but a call to action, an urgent plea for self-awareness and personal responsibility. But here's the ultimate insight, the key that unlocks the potential for profound transformation. The greatest threat to humanity lies not in the darkness itself, but in our denial of it. It is in the shadows we refuse to acknowledge, the impulses we suppress, and the truths we avoid that the greatest dangers fester. By shining a light on these hidden corners of our psyche, by acknowledging and integrating our shadows, we can transform destructive tendencies into creative and constructive forces, both individually and collectively. Wholeness, therefore, comes not from striving for an impossible perfection, but from embracing the totality of our being, acknowledging both the light and the dark aspects of ourselves and our world. The implications of this understanding extend far beyond the realm of individual psychology. Consider the societal challenges that plague our world today: political polarization, social injustice, environmental destruction. These are not merely external problems. They are reflections of the unacknowledged shadows within us all. A world struggling with division and conflict desperately needs individuals who are willing to confront their inner darkness, to embrace a more integrated view of themselves and others. The ethical ramifications of understanding the shadow require a re-evaluation of societal values, encouraging individuals to take responsibility for the collective shadow and challenge the status quo through self-examination and a commitment to positive societal change. You have the power to choose to confront your shadow, to explore the hidden depths of your psyche with courage and compassion. You are capable of cultivating goodness, resisting manipulation, and becoming a force for positive change in a world that desperately needs it. This path of shadow integration is challenging, filled with moments of discomfort and uncertainty, but it is also a path of profound growth, healing, and transformation. And remember, you are not alone in this journey. We are all connected, all grappling with our own shadows, and together we can work towards a more conscious and compassionate world. It may not be easy, but it is essential. So, as you move forward, how will you apply what you've learned today to your own life? What steps will you take to integrate your shadow and contribute to a more just world? I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below, to subscribe for more content like this, and to explore additional resources on shadow work. The journey of shadow integration is a lifelong quest, but it is a quest worth undertaking for the sake of our own souls and the future of humanity. Thank you for looking.